Hi, everybody. It's Jean Humbrecht with Humbrecht Law, criminal and traffic defense attorney in Manassas, Virginia. Welcome to my somewhat weekly local business spotlight. I have a very special guest today, Clarissa May Fleming of Making Money Make Sense. Clarissa is a financial advisor, and I met Clarissa through networking events, actually, and I found that every time she speaks about what she does, it's always been very insightful and helpful. So I thought she would be a great guest to have on the show. And before I go any further introducing her, I want to tell anybody that's watching, if you have any questions, which I'm sure you will, because we're talking about money, you can type you can type them in the comments, and I will ask Clarissa while we are live here. And if you're watching a replay of this or catching it later, you can still type in questions, and it'll notify us, and we can answer. Well, I can let Clarissa know, and we can get your questions answered. So it's the beginning of the new year.
Yes.
Is money a stressful topic? Of course it is. Are you uncertain of how to best handle things? I know I am. Looking for ideas on budgeting, debt protection, or saving for the future? Well, why not have a personal finance coach? We all know people with a personal trainer lose weight faster. That is true. And a personal finance coach does the same thing in the money department. So I am going to turn it over to Clarissa now. If you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and maybe explain a little bit about what a financial advisor or planner, I know there are differences, exactly what it is that you do and how a financial advisor can help people.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me on, Jean. It's obviously awesome to be able to connect. We always see each other at these networking groups. And it's like, hi, and then we're off again. So I'm a financial advisor and a fiduciary. So that sounds great. And it's like, what in the heck does that mean? So what I do in essence is figure out all the pieces of your finances. And fiduciary just means I'm ethically and legally bound to do the thing that's best for you. It's kind of crazy that there's a separate title in order to just be a financial person that does the best thing for the client, but there's a separate title, and that's what fiduciary means. So I help everyone with everything from life insurance and investments, retirement plans, healthcare solutions, debt planning, budget planning, really all of the money stuff, figuring it all out. Because I've really found that the number one problem people have with money is simply confusion. You don't know what you don't know. There's so much stuff out there. We get bombarded every single day. Oh, you should do this. Oh, you should do this. Oh, you should never do this. You should always do this. And this is what you do. Okay, I'm not doing anything. I don't want to mess it up. So I'm just going to freeze and not take action. And that's really the biggest problem is it's kind of like going to the grocery store. Okay, which mustard to get? There are like 40 kinds. So what do? You get the same kind you got every other time because it's simpler than looking at all the options. So what I do is look at all the options for you and help you figure out if I want to get to point B and I'm at point A, what are all the little stops I'm going to have to make in order to get there? And what's the best route? It's kind of a GPS for finances.
Oh, that's a really good way to describe it.
Yeah, because we all get to California. We just head west, but if we have a map, we're going to get there a lot faster.
That is true. So you mentioned, having a GPS to get you where you want to be, and there are so many different options and people get stuck. So where is the best place for people to start? We all know that we should at some point have life insurance. We know that we should be investing. We know we should have money in retirement. We know we need health insurance. Where do we all start?
The first thing is really to analyze where you're at, because we all know we should have those things, but we normally all have a little bit of everything already. It's just figuring it out. Like, oh, great, I've got health insurance. Let's make sure that's checked off. Oh, I've got a little bit in savings. Like, what I do is ask all the questions and figure out where you're at. So starting point A, and then figure out where you are in life and what you need to be doing first. So normally what I do is what we call financial house. So financial house is just like a real house. If you started with the attic, it's going to collapse. You got to get the foundation done first and get that solid and then build up your walls. So the foundation is actually a written budget knowing where your money's going, as crazy as it is, most people run out of money at the end of the month because they just don't understand what they're actually spending. So having that written down. And then at the same time, if you've got a family or someone depending on your income, life insurance. Now, if you're 25 years old with no debt and you're single, yeah, it wouldn't be the worst idea to have a small policy so mom and dad aren't stuck with a funeral if God forbid something happens, but it's not critical, okay? It's when you've got a spouse and kids and a mortgage and somebody that is depending on your income, that's when that really needs to be in that foundation piece. It really should be called income protection insurance, not life insurance, because it's really insulating your income. After that, then you want to attack credit card debt and getting a small emergency fund in place. So a small really depends on your income. Maybe you're someone that makes 30 to 50,000. Well, then we're talking maybe get a cushion of like $1,000 to $2,000. If you're somebody that makes six figures, you really want a cushion of more like $3,000 to $10,000. Because you can imagine most people's deductible on their auto insurance is $1,000. So one wreck, there's $1,000 right there out of your emergency fund. And most of us can't afford to just not fix our car. Something happens, you have to fix it. So that's a big factor. And then after you've got that piece done and you've really got a plan for attacking the debt, then it's to really get a bigger emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Somebody's out of work, COVID-19 shuts down the country again. You've got a cushion. Then attack retirement.
Okay.
You look like you had a question.
I have several questions. So you mentioned, I wanted to interrupt and now I can't
Sorry,
remember.
I should have interrupted. I apologize.
Next time I will. So in the order that you were discussing things, you said, if you have a family, right? Life insurance, and then I think what you said in a nutshell, if you have a life insurance, income protection insurance,
Right.
savings, and then working on lowering your debt.
Yes.
Why that order? And I ask this because well, I mean, for a number of reasons. If you have debt, it's going to affect you on a daily basis. You're going to have potential issues getting credit cards, getting housing approval, and if something like COVID-19 happens, and you don't have any money in savings. So why that order?
Yeah, and that is probably the most common question I get. And here's why. If you have cash and you have a card, you spend those differently. It's a mental game. So let's say, for example, I need 4 new tires. My car tires went kaputs. I need 4 tires.
Mm-hmm.
And I have $2,000 in the bank and I have a credit card with a $2,000 limit. Well, here's what you do. When you go to the car dealership and you're going to get tires, that cash is really hard to part with. So you're going to be looking at it going, you know what? I really don't need those really expensive tires. The $900 ones are fine. They're not bad. They're just not cream of the crop. I'm just going to go with the $900 tires. But when you've got a credit card, you're going to go, you know what? I really want to make sure that they're really top notch. And I'm going to get the $1,200 or the $1,500 tires. You spend it differently. So there's a big thing there. Once you've got that cushion, you've also worked really hard to get that little cushion of cash. So you're going to be more conscious about not building up more of the debt on the credit card side. So by doing that, it's not so much of a numbers as it is a mental game. Money is 90% mentality. It really is. So by doing that, you're insulating yourself on how you're spending your money, because you're going to spend cash a lot slower than the credit card. It's real easy to swipe. And then secondly, you're less likely to build up more credit card debt. Because like you said, it does affect your credit worthiness. But honestly, if you've got credit card debt you're trying to get rid of, you probably don't need to be worried about getting another card.
Yeah, well, I just say that because I know how quickly people can fall into credit trouble, and and while yes, in some ways you can get out of it fairly quickly if you do certain things, sometimes people just find themselves in situations where it takes a long time to climb out of it.
Oh, yeah. It's always a long haul to climb out of it. It's not a long haul to build the habits that start decreasing it. So what I mean by that is when you shrink your budget numbers enough, your reckless spending, extra spending, all that enough that you can start creating a cushion. By doing that, you've also stopped spending on the cards because you've started saving a cushion. So by doing that again, that's allowing you to have more flux in your budget to pay off the credit cards, to not have them constantly going up and up and up and up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because
That
it's
makes
not consistent. Some people have like 7 years before we're able to get, even with the best laid plans, 7 years before they're out of credit card debt. It really depends on how much card debt they've got, what their interest rates are, all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And do you, or does a financial advisor, um, let say I come to you, I'm my age, which I won't say, under 40. Let's say a person comes to you, a working professional, no children, mid 30s, um, probably didn't do the best job at investing and not. They want to start where they're at, right? So they don't
Right.
have life insurance. Let's say there's very little in retirement, not much in savings. Where do you start with that person? Because I think a lot, and the reason I ask this is because I think a lot of people in that situation think that they don't need to talk to a financial planner because they think, well, I don't have kids now. Like, what does it matter? Like, I don't own a home. I'm relatively healthy. I don't need life insurance. So how do you approach it with that person?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is take down those basics and figure out where their money's at, figure out what debt they've got. Do they have co-signed loans? Do they have student loans? Anything like that. So I can kind of nail it down. Now, the reality, if they're somewhere in their 30s and they don't have kids and they don't have a mortgage, I'm not going to push them to get life insurance on that side effect, but I am going to say, look, let's get something small in place for one simple reason.
Mm-hmm.
Say they get a $50,000 policy that costs them $25 a month. 25 is not going to break them, but
Mm-hmm.
here's what it does. You're locking in their age and health, because
Mm-hmm.
we all know we generally don't get healthier the older we get.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing that, you're insulating them for, oh crud, they got the next year they were end up in the hospital for chest pains, or they were in a horrible car accident that resulted in 5 surgeries, and now they can't get life insurance for a period of time after that, or sometimes depending on the disease ever again. Or as you know, maybe they have a huge amount of traffic tickets that rack up. That actually can affect your life insurance ability to get it if you have DUIs or reckless drivings or anything like that. Obviously, if you can imagine,
that in my book.
Exactly. And we want to go to the whole, like, if you're a violent criminal, yeah, you're not getting life insurance. Felonies, that kind of thing. But I would encourage them to just get something small, nothing that's going to strain their budget. But for example, let's say you're 32 years old, just throw out a number, and mom and dad helped you co-sign for student loans. You're working on your own. You don't really have responsibilities, but you've got 40,000 in student loan debt. Well, if you die, mom and dad are stuck with that bill. So that's one I would be looking at. Okay. Because then mom and dad really should have a policy to protect themselves so that they're not stuck with your student loan debt. I had a couple that their son was killed by a drunk driver up in Maryland, and he was in medical school, and they got stuck with over $500,000 in his student loan debt because they co-signed for it, and they lost their home over it. So keep in mind. But what I would do is look at that piece. Okay, take that aside. That's the not fun combo. But then I'd look at, okay, what do you have in retirement? Does your employer give a match? Are you really taking advantage of the match? If not, what can we do in your budget so that you can take advantage of that free money that your employer is offering? Because free money is always a good thing. And the reality is the more money they put in their 401k, it also is a tax write-off. So it might be that losing $100 into their 401k each month, it's really not losing $100 because of that tax write-off at the end of the year. So looking at those things, maybe figuring out, maybe the spouse can get a Roth IRA, or they can get a Roth IRA that would do it. It depends. There's different rules about what accounts you can have at the same time, what you can contribute to. So for example, you can have a 401k and a Roth at the same time. You can't have a 401k and an IRA at the same time and contribute to both. Different rules on that one. But yeah, trying to see where that is. And then of course, then looking at their debt. So what I do is put together a document that has everything about them financially. Every single debt, the interest rate, the payments, the balances, every single investment account, the balance, what kind of investments it's in, all their budgets, all their numbers, so that they have one place to look at everything. And it's scary as heck. But once you've got it, it shows if I follow this, I'm going to pay off all the credit cards by this date. I'm going to pay off the house by this date. I'm going to be able to retire with this much money by this date. And it's very freeing to have that information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you start with where the person is at.
Yep.
You get all the information, and then I guess does it depend on what their goals are, or when you have that information, you tell them what you think they should do? Like, if they don't have life insurance, or if they don't have a retirement, like whatever their situation is, like, do you make suggestions as to what they should do?
I mean, I always want to focus on what their goals are first, because if there's one thing as a priority, like maybe they're just one that I cannot sleep at night because I've got $3,000 worth of credit card debt. And in my world, I'm still going, it's only 3,000. It's not the end of the world. You're okay. But it's stressful for them. So we're going to focus on that because that's the stressor for them. I am definitely going to make recommendations. I run into it all the time, especially with under 40-year-old men. They will tell me in the same sentence, God love you guys, that I'm never going to make it to retirement. I am too crazy. I'm never going to make it. I'm going to die before then. And then we'll talk life insurance. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm fine. Both. It can't be both. So I will make recommendations based on what I think, as well as going after their goals. And single people are always a little easier in some ways because I'm only communicating with one person's thoughts and goals. Couples, a lot of times it's this person thinks we should go this way and this person thinks we should go the other way. And it's trying to marry the two ideas to get them on the same page. I sometimes joke, I feel like a marriage counselor at times trying to get people on the same page with things.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting point, though. So I can see a situation where one half of the couple wants to do certain things with money, like invest it or life insurance, or whatever the situation is, but the other person doesn't think that they have the money to do that because they're focused more on having the money available now. And I don't want to get into a whole thing about life insurance and retirement, but my basic understanding, no, I mean, we could do hours on that, on just those.
Yeah.
The basic understanding is that if you take the money out, too soon, not to go into the nuances of it, but you're essentially penalized. Like, you can get your money, but you end up kind of you might lose money. So if you put your money in there, I think you have to intend that it's going to be there, unless you have a true emergency where you really need to take it out. So you put that money in there. I mean, your goal has to be not to touch it, right, for a long time.
Exactly. Well, and that's why, like I said, I put getting an emergency fund before really attacking retirement. Now, 401k match, free money is always free money. Take advantage of it. But an emergency fund allows you to have more freedom to know that when I put this money in my retirement account, I'm not going to have to touch it, because the government penalizes you if you pull it out below 59 and a half years old. There must have been some battle in Congress to make it 59 years old in 6 months, but it is what it is. So you really are penalized on it. Life insurance, there's many different kinds. I honestly, for most young people, recommend just what's called term insurance. It's like auto insurance. You pay a month, you get a month. So there's no kicks, no fancies. You die, you get a big check. That's it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's a lot simpler and cheaper. Because the other kind you can get is whole life, which in some instances does make sense. But for young people especially, if you can imagine, you're locking a term policy with a savings account, which often has a lower earning than you could earn on your own investments. So you'd be better off instead of putting it in that savings account, put it in your own savings account where you're earning a little bit better and have a little more freedom, like you said, so you don't have those penalties.
Okay. So let's talk about life insurance for a minute. I had somebody on the show, like, I think it was like 2 years ago, we talked about life insurance. But obviously there could be different people watching, and I think it's always worth a conversation, because with any financial topic, because I remember I was talking to somebody, it took me at least 10 times for this person to explain um, all this mortgage stuff and closing costs
Oh
and
gosh, yeah.
um, so, and my point is, you can be trying very hard to pay attention, and some stuff you're just not going to retain. So I think it's always worth talking about. So, and we did talk about life insurance a little bit, but if you could basically just tell anybody who's watching, you know, very briefly why they need the income protection insurance, is what it's called, and not life insurance. What exactly it does, and go into maybe a little bit more about what you just said, getting it when you're younger and healthier, because I've heard that before too. And I think a lot of us don't think that way. We don't think about something until we need it.
Right. And so you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't need to I'm older. Well, when grandma is 80 years old, she doesn't have a lot of financial responsibilities.
Hmm.
She might need to pay for a funeral, but while not everyone plans, I would all hope that by the time we're all 70 and 80 years old, we've saved up the $5,000 or $6,000 it takes to put us in the ground.
Hmm.
If we haven't done that, there are a lot of other things that have gone awry. That's the way it is. But at the same time, let's say you don't have that money at 70 or 80 years old. It's not a financial destroyer for families. It means that the kids get together, they all put a little money in, and we take care of mom. That's a very different picture when the 35-year-old dad of two with a mortgage dies, because that breadwinner just disappeared. So if that family is relying on that $4,000 a month income that he brings in, and that income disappears, well, the family just lost their health insurance. They just lost the ability to pay the mortgage. The mom now has to go back to work and probably pay daycare, which means she not only has to go back to work and make as much as him, she has to make as much as him plus daycare costs, which is not going to happen if, say, someone has been out of the workforce for a while.
Hmm.
Or even if it's a two-income household. A two-income household relies on two incomes. You can't take half of it away and still pay the bills. So life insurance is really to insulate and protect that family. I normally say you want to assume at least for 4 or 5 years worth of cushion. So that could mean, and there's lots of different ways to do it. There's no right or wrong. Normally, if it's a stay-at-home mom, I will say let's have enough to pay off the mortgage and pay off any substantial debts. And the reason being, if that's gone, then that person, be it a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, can now get a job that's going to pay the utilities, the groceries, the basics, and not have to worry about a roof over the head or the debt that was originally there. Now,
Hmm.
if it's a dual income household, then you want to look at what is it going to take to replace that income for, say, 4 or 5 years until we've adjusted to this new life. Because you're not actually replacing it for 4 or 5 years. You're replacing it for 1 or 2 and then adjusting things slowly so that you don't rely on it by the fourth or fifth year. Because that's what's going to happen. Life is going to change if you lose somebody. It just is. But it's the financial hardship that's the worst. An example is they always say there's 2 deaths. There's the physical death, and then about 90 to 120 days later, there's the financial death. It's when everything really starts coming to a head on the bills. You're behind. Things are shutting off if you don't have them paid. 3 months behind, cars are repoed,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So that's really the reason behind life insurance, is to protect that family, especially if there's kids involved. 2 single people, or 2 individuals, and there's no kids, and one dies. Worst case, you sell the house and you move. It's
Hmm.
not nearly as crippling. You don't have others dependent on you.
Hmm. So when someone purchases life insurance, um, let's say you buy it, let's say a 35-year-old person with a family buys it today,
Mhm.
and something happens like a month from now.
Mhm.
How is the payout from that life insurance affected by him only paying for like 1 or 2 months into it?
I had somebody in 2017 that we wrote the policy on October 31st, and he died on November 14th.
Oh, wow.
He came home and his son actually found him on the floor. He died of a brain aneurysm.
Wow.
So I've had three now that actually died within the first 2 months of writing the policy. So it pays out as long as they were approved or would have been approved. So what that means is they got all the info, maybe they did the blood work or whatever it was sent off, and it came back. Like, for example, that one, he died November 14th. He was approved November 17th. So he was approved 3 days later. But because if he had lived, he would have been approved, they did
Hmm.
the payout. and they paid it and it was fine. That's the general rule. If, for example, if it had come back, oh, wait a minute, you had cancer and you would have been denied,
Right.
then you would not have paid out.
When you say pay out, for how long do they pay that health insurance or the life insurance?
It's a big chunk. So when you get life insurance, you're getting it for 400,000 or 200,000, and they write you
you sign up for a certain amount, a certain
correct,
dollar amount.
a certain
Okay.
dollar. And then as an advisor, my job is to then say, okay, now we have $400,000. What is the best way to handle this? So for example, right now mortgage rates, okay, until the last few months, last couple of years, they were historically low. So say you have a 2% mortgage, just for even numbers. I'm probably not going to tell you to pay off the mortgage. I'm going to say, look, we can put in an account, make 4 or 5% and take that and pay the mortgage with it. It's going to be much better than just chunking it all at the mortgage. Different things like that. So when I've got a death, I normally meet with those clients 12 to 15 times, going over everything from how do we cancel the cell bill? How are we handling the medical bills? How are we transferring the bank accounts? Going to probate. I've got a probate court appointment with another client next week because her husband passed away. And I'm going to the courthouse with her to take care of it all. So that's a lot of it is the hand holding, because when someone passes away, all the legal stuff, as you know, if you're not familiar with that legal jargon, you're like deer in headlights. What in the heck am I doing?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked that question because I didn't think about all that stuff. Like what do you do with the money when you have it? Yeah, and you need to have a plan or talk to somebody like Clarissa to get a plan. Yeah.
People disappear it are able to make it disappear very quickly. I've seen them go through money because they've never had that much in their life. And
Right.
they say, oh, it's plenty. It's not going to go away. It can go away faster than you think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when you pay into life insurance, so I don't really know how to ask this question. If you apply for it and you're approved and something happens to you, no matter how long you've paid into it, you get that payout, right?
With most, yes. There are some policies, I won't personally sell them, but just so people are aware on this call, there are some policies generally geared towards older, like you see the ads, no medical questions. Those policies generally require that you live for 2 years. So you have to make 2 years of payments before you're eligible for a payout. And honestly, they're marketing it towards people who are generally in poor health. And they're gambling. The insurance company is gambling you're going to die before they have to pay it out.
Okay.
But otherwise, like real insurance, for lack of a better way of putting it, like anything I handle, the only way you would not get a payout is if you killed yourself. So you couldn't sign up for a life insurance policy and then end your own life a month later.
Right.
Which is kind of understandable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's better to get it when you're younger, because even if you don't have a family, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you are healthier than
it's based on age, health, and BMI. Those are the 3 big factors in life insurance. Tobacco use. Tobacco use is a big one.
Oh yeah. So age, BMI, health, and tobacco use. So if you're a non-smoker and you are young, healthy, and have a healthy BMI, you don't have a family yet, would you still recommend getting it to lock in like lower rates?
It really depends on their budget. If their budget is really tight, I'm going to say, look, it's not critical. Let's go ahead and build up your cushion, build up your savings. And most 20 somethings are all broke, yet they can go out every weekend. So they can afford the 15 or 20 bucks for a small policy, because that's going to give them that locked in. So worst case scenario and something happens, someone's got enough money to put them in the ground and pay off maybe any last medical bills or whatever.
That leads me to another question. So how quickly who can access the life insurance money, and how quickly do they pay it out? Because you don't have a lot of time between a death and a funeral most of the time.
Yep. So that really depends on the kind of life insurance you're getting. Whoever can access it is the person you designated as a beneficiary. And this is a note for everyone on all accounts, checking accounts, retirement accounts, anything. You need a beneficiary listed, because if you don't, as Jean will tell you, the laws are a pain in the tail if there's no beneficiary listed.
Mhm.
That being said, most life insurance is a 90-day payout, but you can do a sign off at the funeral home that will allow them to get a check directly. So what it is they take a document, they call the insurance company, verify the policy is in force and accurate. And then instead of, let's say you were supposed to get $100,000, but the funeral was 10,000, you would get a check for 90 and the funeral home would get a check for 10. So that's how they do it. Um, most of the policies I handle pay out in about 14 to 15 days from the date they get the documents. Sometimes the biggest holdup is getting the county to release the death certificate, because you can't do anything until you have a death certificate in hand. So especially during COVID, that was taking forever to get death certificates out of certain jurisdictions.
And how does one get a death certificate? Like, let's say somebody dies intestate. That means without a will, like they don't have any documents. Like, how do you get that death certificate?
You don't need any of that for the death
Oh,
certificate. The certificate is issued through the health department once they're notified by the Department of Health or the funeral home that somebody has died. So, or the hospital or whoever handles them, it'll be there. Normally, the funeral home will just give you the option to purchase 1 to 10 death certificates, because you're going to need them for random things. For if you've got a house, if you've got vehicles, if there's
oh, right, right.
accounts, they'll need copies of the death certificate. Yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting at is, how does one just go to the Department of Health to get that death certificate?
If you are a next of kin, you can just request it from Vital Records, a copy of a death certificate.
And you just have to show your ID. I mean, how do you prove that you're? So I'm being such a lawyer right now, but how do you prove you're the next of kin?
Well, you'll be listed on the death certificate. If you're the spouse, you're going to be listed, or the parents are listed on the death certificate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Clearly,
Honestly, they're really
clearly,
not
I'm lucky
about
to
who gets
get.
a death certificate, because the death certificate is just one piece. It's not like I can submit the death certificate to the, for example, an IRA like Fidelity. I can't submit a death certificate and get somebody's money. I'm using that as proof that the person has died for them to then start the process of moving the money to whoever is the designated beneficiary on that account already.
Okay. Okay. So you can, walk in there and get a copy of the death certificate, but that's really not going to get you anything, because all that it's going to do is get whatever financial institution to release money and documentation to the people who it's supposed to go to.
Exactly.
Got
Exactly.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that sounds simple when we discuss it, but I never would have thought about that. Never.
You know what? Lots of things that happen in a death people do not know about, because nobody handles it. Like, when something happens, even if you're the one that handles it, you're in such a fog that trying to recall exactly what you did later is sometimes tricky. So I've handled so many deaths that it's much easier for me to say, okay, we need to do this. We need to do this. Like, one of the most common things people do wrong. So take note of this. If somebody dies, one of the first things people want to do is, oh, let me cancel their debit card so I don't have any autos. Like, it'll cancel all the automatics or whatever. That is one of the worst things you can do. And here's why. If you call the bank and cancel the debit card, you've now notified the bank that they're dead, which means their last paycheck can't be deposited. Their reimbursement on their auto insurance can't be deposited. All these things can't be deposited into the account, and the account is frozen. What if that was your only source of money? Well, now the account's frozen until they can finish everything up. So it's really one of the last things you want to do is to notify the bank. I mean, you do have to notify them, and you can't, for example, if it's an account only in their name, they need to have the documentation to move it into your name. But if it's a joint account, just cancel all the autos that's coming from their debit and wait to make sure all of the automatic deposits and checks and things go into the account before you notify the bank.
That makes, that makes a lot of sense. But again, I wouldn't have thought about that at all. I'm glad you said something.
Yeah, it's one of the ones you don't think about a lot. Yeah, honestly, life insurance is probably the least favorite thing of what I do. I really love doing the investment side, because let's be real, nobody likes to talk about dying, but it is a very important piece.
Yeah. And I mean, do you also connect people with, do you ever handle connecting people with creating the end of life documents like a will, advanced healthcare directive, those types of things. Does that ever come up in the course of what you do?
All the time. I was talking to somebody about it tonight, and one of the biggest things I remind them is make sure you're not doing overkill. So, for example, the couple that I met with this afternoon, they're like, well, should I get a trust? They have a house and 2 kids and some retirement accounts. You don't need a trust for that. Don't overdo it. You need a trust if you've got a special needs child, or you've got multiple assets with like adult children that you want to make sure they don't spend down it, or you've got joint ownership in a business with a third party. Those kind of things, you need more complicated financial matters with end of life estate planning. But 90% of America have their home, their cars, maybe a ATV or a boat, and their accounts. For those, you simply need beneficiaries listed, transfer on deaths listed, joint stuff on the houses and the cars, and a basic will. That's all you really need.
Beneficiaries listed, the will, and say those other things again.
So transfer on death, that means, like, let's say, for example, you have a bank account and something happens to you. Well, having a TOD or transfer on death means that, say you had it to your mom, for example, that your mom would immediately be able to access your bank account. Why is that critical? Because why in the heck does she want to have the auto pay to Xfinity cable still come out when you're not using the cable anymore? But you can't get into the bank until after probate if you don't have that on there. So it's so important to have a transfer on death so that they can instantly go on. Did they pay the electric bill? Has the mortgage been paid? Do I need to cancel the auto pay for? I mean, I had one widow, gosh, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. It took him forever to cancel the auto order of his wife's face care products. He had like 6 months of it stacked up because they wouldn't talk to him when he called to cancel. He's like, I really don't want face care.
Yeah.
It was one of those things. So having those kind of documents on there, I mean, you do need like medical directives and medical power of attorneys too, but you don't need trusts. You don't need it, a lot of that fancier jargon, just a basic will.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you've got a special needs child, that's a whole different discussion. And we could spend an hour on that one, but most people don't.
Got it. Well, we talked a lot about life insurance, and that was partly my fault. It was my fault. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss in regards to financial planning while we're on this live? I mean, I know there's so much, but just anything else that we didn't get to that you think is really important?
I think the biggest thing and the biggest reason people don't start is they are scared of being judged. I'm not where I should be. I'm not where I think my colleagues are. I'm not doing as well as, my girlfriend or my brother or whatever. And that fear of judgment can really hurt you because you're going to not move and you're not going to take action. I've been there. We're a military family. We've had all the fun, loveliness of finances in the Army, and you're not going to get judged by me. I'm going to sit down and say, okay, wherever you're at, we're going to fix it. We're going to do better, and we're going to keep rolling. And that's the biggest thing, is just make an appointment, find me on Facebook, stalk me for a while, whatever you want to do. I'm more than willing to help you on any aspect, but take the first step. Even if it's even not me, somebody else, take the first step, because fear of judgment really hurts people on lots of things. That's why people don't go to the gym to work out. That's why people don't go back to college. They don't do lots of things because they're so fearful of appearing to fail and appearing to be judged.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, I run into people all the time. Well, I was just scared to call you. I've been wanting to call you for a while. I'm not scary. My kids think I'm scary, but in general, I'm not scary. So no worries on that.
Well, that was actually a really good thing to leave everybody with. It's never too late to start. And don't be scared, and don't compare yourself to anybody else. But the important thing is to just start wherever you're at. You can get started, and Clarissa can help you to get started, because she starts by finding out exactly where you're at and where you want to go. We came full circle with the whole life right there. All right, Clarissa, I'd love to have you back again to do this, because I feel like there are so many things we can talk about. I mean, there's just so much with finances.
Mhm.
So yeah, I hope you'd be willing to come back sometime.
Absolutely. And if anyone has a topic they'd like us to hit, feel free to comment.
Mhm.
That way we have an idea.
Yeah, because I mean, you might think of questions that I never would have even thought of, you as in the audience. So,
Right.
um, thanks, Clarissa. I forgot to tell you this before we started, but when I end the broadcast, you and I are still going to be on here for a second so we can chat. You don't have to X out the screen. But thank you, everybody who tuned in today. And if you're watching this replay later, thank you for watching it. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned earlier, type it in, and Clarissa or I will get back to you. And I'll also put Clarissa, you can put your contact info in the chat as well. But
Perfect.
thanks, everybody, and I will see you on the next live.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.